In 1949, British and US intelligence agencies were working with King Zog I and his personal guard, recruiting Albanian refugees and émigrés from Egypt, Italy and Greece, training them in Cyprus, Malta and West Germany before infiltrating them into Albania. Guerrilla units entered Albania in 1950 and 1952, but were captured or killed by Albanian security forces. Kim Philby, who was a Soviet double agent working as a liaison officer between MI6 and the CIA, had leaked details of the infiltration plan to Moscow, who informed Hoxha. In 1973, Hoxha suffered a heart attack from which he never fully recovered. He was in very precarious health from the late 1970s onward. He turned most state functions over to his eventual successor, Ramiz Alia. In his final days, he was confined to a wheelchair and suffered from diabetes and cerebral ischemia. On the 9th of April 1985, he was struck by a ventricular fibrillation. Over the next 48 hours, he suffered repeated episodes of arrhythmia, and he died in the early hours of April 11, 1985, at the age of 76. The State University of Tirana was established in 1957, the first in Albania. Malaria was successfully fought through advances in healthcare and through the draining of swampland. From 1965 to 1985, no cases of malaria were reported. No cases of syphilis had been recorded for 30 years, and in 1938 the number of physicians was 1.1 per 10,000 people and there was only one hospital bed per 1,000 people. In 1950, the number of physicians hadn't increased, but there were 4 times as many hospital beds per head. During Hoxha's rule, there were 6 institutions for political prisoners, and 14 labor camps where political prisoners and common criminals worked together. Article 47 of the Albanian Criminal Code stated that to escape outside the state, as well as refusal to return to the fatherland by a person who has been sent to serve or has been permitted temporarily to go outside the state, was an act of treason, a crime punishable by a minimum sentence of 10 years imprisonment and a maximum sentence of death. After the Albanian liberation on November 29, 1944, several Albanian partisan divisions crossed the border into German-occupied Yugoslavia, where they fought alongside Tito's partisans and the Soviet Red Army in a joint campaign that successfully drove out the last pockets of German resistance. Marshal Tito, during the Yugoslav Conference years later, thanked Hoxha for the assistance that their Albanian partisans had given fighting the occupation. Although the monarchy wasn't formally abolished, King Zog I was banned from returning to Albania. On October 22, 1944, the Anti-Fascist Committee for National Liberation became the democratic government of Albania after a meeting in Berat, and Enver Hoxha was chosen as the interim prime minister. Tribunals were set up to try alleged war criminals who were branded enemies of their people, and were presided over by Koki Zodza. After the break with Yugoslavia, Hoxha aligned Albania with the Soviet Union. From 1948 to 1960, $200 million in Soviet aid was given to Albania for technical and infrastructural expansion. Albania served as a pro-Soviet outpost in the Adriatic. A Soviet submarine base was also built on the Albanian island of Sazan, posing a hypothetical threat to the U.S. Sixth Fleet in the Mediterranean. In 1969 Hoxha abolished direct taxation, and during this period the quality of education and healthcare continued to improve. A nationwide electrification campaign began in 1960 and Albania was expected to have full electricity by 1985. This was actually achieved on October 25, 1970, making Albania the first nation in the world to achieve complete electrification. From 1935 to 1936, he was employed as a secretary at the Albanian consulate in Brussels in Belgium. After returning to Albania, he worked as a contract teacher in the Gymnasium of Tirana. During his time there, Hoxha taught French and morals in the Korça Lyceum from 1937 to 1939, and also served as the caretaker of the school library. In June 1947, the Central Committee of Yugoslavia began publicly criticizing Hoxha, accusing him of taking an individualistic and anti-Marxist line. When Albania responded by making agreements with the Soviet Union to purchase a supply of agricultural machinery, Yugoslavia said that Albania must not enter into any agreements with other countries without Yugoslav approval. Hoxha's legacy also included a complex of 173,371 one-man concrete bunkers across a country of 3 million inhabitants, to act as lookouts and gun emplacements. The bunkers were built to be strong and mobile, with the intention that they could be placed by a crane or a helicopter into a hole. A rift developed with the Yugoslav communists when they disagreed with Albania's goal of establishing a Greater Albania, and asked the communists in Albania to withdraw their agreement. According to Hoxha, Josip Broz Tito did not believe that Kosovo was Albanian, and Serbian opposition to the transfer made it an impractical option. In March 1943, the First National Conference of the Albanian Communist Party formally elected Hoxha as first secretary. On July 10, 1943, the Albanian partisans were organized into regular units of companies, battalions and brigades and named the Albanian National Liberation Army. On January 11, 1946, King Zog I was officially deposed and Albania was proclaimed the People's Republic of Albania. As the first secretary of the party, Hoxha was the de facto head of state and the most powerful man in the country. After Yugoslavia broke off relations with the Soviet Union in July 1948, Hoxha instructed all Yugoslav technical advisors to leave the country, and unilaterally declared all treaties and agreements between the two countries null and void. On November 8, 1941, the Communist Party of Albania was founded. Hoxha was chosen from the Hoxha group, as a Muslim representative by the two Yugoslav envoys as one of the 7 members of the Provisional Central Committee. His father, Halil Hoxha, was a Muslim cloth merchant who traveled widely across Europe and the US. He named his son Enver, after the famous Ottoman military officer and member of the Young Turks, Enver Pasha. In 1930, Hoxha went to study at the University of Montpellier in France on a state scholarship from the Faculty of Natural Science, but lost an Albanian state scholarship for neglecting his studies. Albania celebrates its Independence Day on November 28. In the People's Socialist Republic of Albania, the National Day was November 29, the day the country was liberated from the European Axis forces.